Battle Day 3725. Good welcome, citizens. Our united efforts continue to be rewarded in the struggle for RP. Wherever there is spawn point oppression, we are there. Not with empty promises and propaganda, but with divination.
Welcome to the channel. I am Commander Tyrael, and this is CA-148 USS Newport news. A Des Moines-class heavy cruiser, which were a trio of very large heavy cruisers commissioned for the US Navy in 1948 and 1949. Exceeded in size only by the 30,000 long-ton Alaska-class supercruisers. Newport News was the last to be commissioned, making her the last active all-gun cruiser and the first completely air-conditioned surface ship in the US Navy.
General quarters, all hands man your battle stations up forward on the starboard side, down and aft on the port side.
Commissioned on January 29, 1949 at Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, Virginia, CA-148 was deployed to the Mediterranean, assisting nations during political and natural emergencies. Refit to flagship standard in 1962, she participated in the Cuban quarantine during the infamous missile crisis. In October of 1967, she and her company were tasked as the flagship commander, Cruiser Destroyer Flotilla 3, providing gunfire support off Vietnam's coast. At 1 AM on October 1, 1972, while in action off the demilitarized zone, Newport News sustained an inbore explosion in her center 8-inch gun of No. 2 turret. A defective fuse caused the projectile to detonate almost immediately upon firing. A total of 20 sailors were killed and another 36 suffered serious injuries from toxic gas inhalation. The barrel was blown forward from the gun, the explosion causing extensive damage to the center gun mount. The original intentions were to replace the damaged mount with one from her sister ships, both of which had been decommissioned, but it was considered too expensive. As a result, the damage was not repaired and the turret was simply closed off for the remainder of the ship's career. Decommissioned on June 27, 1975, Newport News was laid up in the mothball fleet at Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Pennsylvania until it was sold for scrap in 1993. Derived from the Baltimore-class heavy cruisers, Newport News was larger, had an improved machinery layout, and carried a new auto-loading rapid-fire 8-inch gun, the Mark 16. 12 ships of the class were planned, but only 3 were completed: the Des Moines, Salem, and Newport News, with USS Dallas cancelled at 28% completion. The new and improved Mark 16 guns of the main battery were the first auto-loading 8-inch guns fielded by the US Navy. They allowed a much higher rate of fire than earlier designs, about twice what was previously capable of doing. The auto-loading mechanism could function at any elevation, giving some anti-aircraft capability. The secondary battery of 6 twin 5-inch guns remained standard, held over from the Baltimore design. The Des Moines-class originally carried a stronger battery of small caliber anti-aircraft guns, 12 twin 3-inch guns, that were considered superior to the earlier quad-mounted Bofors. However, these were later removed during Newport's flagship refit, as they were of limited use in the emerging missile age. This relegated the class to a fleet carrier escort role. Their speed made them valuable in this mission and useful in show the flag visits. Newport is decently armoured for a heavy cruiser, just like the preceding class. The most notable difference is that 6-inch main belt that has been extended to cover the entire main batteries, with 5-inch bulkheads being added to divide the citadel. It helps to isolate damage in machinery and ammo stores. Unlike other US cruisers, this ship lacks any anti-fragmentation armour, making her slightly vulnerable to high explosive fire, with risk offset by well spread out crew compartments placed deep in the hull. Her main battery turrets are armoured similarly to the Baltimore-class cruisers, with slightly thicker armour on the sides and the turret roof. Compared to those found on the Baltimore-class cruisers, her main battery barbettes are less prone to catastrophic damage. However, Turret 2 presents a major hazard: its high placement and secondary ammo stores being grouped together without a bulkhead to separate them. Like other American cruisers, she lacks meaningful torpedo defense, with the ship's large, empty nose. Bow tanking the torpedo is your only real defense. Do not let them hit a turret, at any cost. Even a relatively small torpedo to a fore turret can destroy the ship. Thanks to the revolutionary autoloader, The USS Newport News has formidable firepower and makes her a serious threat to enemy cruisers and even some capital ships at close range. Being the same armament as the Baltimore-class, the guns also have similar shell choices. The stock common SAP and its researchable upgrade, their Mark 17 shell, have very poor penetration and explosive filler, possibly the worst shell for their caliber, performing worse than most 6-inch guns and some 5-inch guns. The shell will still devastate unarmoured PT boats and some destroyers, however it's still worse in this role than a comparable size shell. The high explosive shell is reasonably effective, the 9.5 kilos of filler capable of harassing deck mounts, setting fires and poking holes in enemy hulls, but it won't do well against ships with capable armouring and anti-frag armour. It should be noted that when using the pure HE rounds, the Brooklyn and Helena will still put out more TNT per minute than the Newport. 882 kilos per minute versus Newport's 855 kilos of TNT. It's only marginal but worth noting. With the absence of anti-frag armour, a player may discover that the Brooklyn is still a fierce opponent. The super heavy APCBC shells feature an average penetration and filler for 8-inch guns. It is noticeably heavier than the average 8-inch shell and has a slower muzzle velocity, intended to make it able to punch through thin deck armour with a high trajectory, though this does not work in practice due to short combat ranges. It has a lower TNT than the equivalent German or Japanese 8-inch shell and can behave unexpectedly, ammo wrecking instantly in one fight and doing minimal damage in others. This is a theme common to the US 8-inch guns. That being said, it's not a bad shell for using on cruisers and early dreadnoughts, the fast fire rate compensating for the shell and making its damage potential fearsome. The USS Newport News still carries the same amount of main battery ammunition as the Baltimore-class heavy cruisers, which have substantially lower rates of fire, meaning that full auto fire will often result in dry stores in 15 minutes or so. The ship has 6 dual-purpose double-barreled 5-inch turrets, a common layout found on late US light heavy cruisers. They have an excellent SP common shell for use against lightly armoured destroyers and VT fuse shell against aircraft. Though it has a fantastic firepower output, the Newport News is still a cruiser, and therefore suffers from the same weaknesses all cruisers have: capital ships and their heavy guns. In an up tier, battleships will be able to slap you with minimal effort. This is just the nature of naval power structure. The Des Moines is currently the dominant cruiser in all 1 vs 1 peer fights, simply by virtue of her displacement and her firepower. Other nations do have harder hitting cruiser guns, but none of those can match the fire rate of the Des Moines. Being a pure gun cruiser, the gameplay can be a little stale. The 8-inch autoloader is the only real trick the ship has up its sleeve, and if its guns can't damage the target, it can make for some minor frustrations. The stock shell, being terrible, forces the ship to have to close range to cause any real damage. Also, having poor automatic AA means that players have to rely on the 5-inch guns and remain aware to aerial threats. Once the AP shell is unlocked, it does become much easier to score consistent damage, though in my games I found the rangefinder to be a little inaccurate and the shells inconsistent in their damage. This could just be subjective, as I am much more comfortable with the Japanese 8-inch gun. Due to the amount of 5.7 premium cruisers that get around, I found that most of my matches were at 6.3 or lower, with the occasional full up tier. In the case of an up tier, I just tried to keep a low profile and pick targets where I can. Players should minimize aggro from larger ships and concentrate on destroying all enemies' most powerful cruisers in these games. The Newport specializes in the killing blow, a huge alpha strike against an unsuspecting opponent that is relentless and enduring. Pick a target and pummel them into oblivion. The turrets traverse fast enough to be a reactionary ship, however the risk of ammo detonation means that you should avoid being the first person to get hit in a fight. Overall, the ship is well armoured and resistant against small to medium caliber fire. It has excellent crew distribution, it has formidable firepower, has a search and track radar, it has long-range medium AA with numerous 5-inch secondaries, it has 2 fire control rooms and 10 fire directors for both main battery group and the auxiliary battery. The downsides of the ship are it's extremely fragile against battleships and battle cruisers, with 305mm guns being able to overmatch the bulkhead and pierce the ship fairly easily. The magazine on her second turret is above the waterline. She has a terrible stock shell. She has limited AA capability and a relatively low ammo capacity. Overall, I like the ship. I think she's a great looking ship. I think she's powerful. I think that the playstyle lets her down a little bit, and the playstyle can be a little bit stale. I'm someone that likes to use a variety of tactics when I'm playing, and getting locked into one is just a little bit too much for me. I'm glad that she was the reward for the winter event. I think that it's a worthy award of the naval event. However, I wouldn't go out of my way to buy it. I'm pretty frugal with my spending, and I couldn't justify buying this ship for anything more than maybe 30 Australian dollars, but being that she's not a premium as well, also limits that. Compared to the Helena, I would say that these ships are pretty much on par. They both can do the same amount of work. So what do you think of the ship? Do you think it was a worthy reward? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I feel like some of the other content creators have already done a really good job of breaking down the statistics of the ship, so check them out, Gunship and Rowan's Guide to Naval. Until next time, Commander Tyrael, out.